I'm your host, Liza. Welcome to episode 2 of the campaign. So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about quotes from the Vampire Lestat book that I need to see in season 3 of Interview with the Vampire, aka the Vampire Lestat, the show, because they're changing the name. Behind me, I have Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned, and an Anne Rice interview book, and I'm also currently reading Tale of the Body Thief, which is the 4th book of the Vampire Chronicles. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I would do anything for this book. I would go to the front lines for this book. I will spend the rest of my life chasing the high that I experienced when I was reading this book while listening to Preacher's Daughter by Ethel Cain. I'm a firm believer in when you read, you need to be listening to something that resonates with that story. And Preacher's Daughter perfectly resonates with the Vampire Lestat. I'm so passionate about this. I could go on forever. My top picks are A House in Nebraska, obviously, for when Lestat can't go home to Nicki. And it's, heart-shattering. It ruins your life. It's world-ending, And then also, I like Strangers for when Lestat's being turned, Am I Making You Feel Sick? While he's grappling with realizing that he truly is an evil creature. I like Sun-Bleached Flies as just kind of a standard song to listen to when, things are just rough. The first playlist I made when I was reading the book is this one, and it's called Only the Impossible Can Do the Impossible, and we will get to that quote. That's kind of my more upbeat songs while listening, so I was like, ooh, this is going to be a fun vampire read, and I uploaded all these songs, including the song from the teaser for season 3, Long Face. And then after getting about 100 pages into that book, I Couldn't Stand the Sight of Him Now, which is the most upsetting quote in the book to me. It's just, I think about that quote every day. I have it screenshotted. I have it all over my Instagram, and that's where the songs that are more upsetting come into play. So let's get right into the chunk of this video. I have collected a bunch of quotes. I went through the book, and as you can see, this thing is annotated to the high heavens. She's marked. I don't know, she's marked. Every page is highlighted at least twice. This is the first book that I had a visceral reaction to reading, and it means so much to me. So, first quote that they have to include, obviously, is the beginning of the book, which they put in the teaser. I think it'd be really useful to use it as an opening for one of the concert sequences, which is, I am the Vampire Lestat. I'm immortal, more or less. The light of the sun, the sustained heat of an intense fire. These things might destroy me, but then again, they might not. I think that'd just be a cool one to use. This is another quote. Horror and moral terror can never be exonerated. They have no real value. Pure evil has no real place. And that means, doesn't it, that I have no place. This is in part of the intro to the story when he's been turned forever. This is while he's starting to write the book before he goes back to rehash all of it. And I feel like part of Lestat truly believes that he has no place. But he's so unreliable that there's really not a way for us to know. But I also appreciate about this quote is that it's not a question, it's a statement. He is saying this statement as a fact about how he feels. And I think that's important to notice, that he's very sure of things that he says. There's not a lot of wondering when Lestat's talking. It's a lot of just, I know what I want when I want it, and this is what I have to say about it. And then another one this is from page 15 of my version. He was my companion as no mortal had ever been. Ever is really important here because you have to think about Nicki, okay? This quote is about Louis. This is Lestat talking about Louis before he goes back and rehashes his, childhood and everything. I think that in Louis' telling of the story, he really makes Lestat look like a huge piece of shit. I think he really makes Lestat look terrible and abusive and hurtful and all these negative things. And yes, Lestat can be those things, but we're given this information with no backstory as to why is Lestat like this? Is there a reason for this? Is this a trauma response? We aren't given any of that. So this book really makes it clear as to why he is the way that he is, which I think excuses a lot of his behavior because I think that he is a product of the environment that he was put in. Anyways, but I think it's also important to think about this quote because he says, he was my companion as no other mortal had ever been. Ever meaning more so than Nicki. Nicki was his first love and absolutely devastating and traumatizing and made him, bury himself for 100 years. And considering how tumultuous the Lestat relationship was, it's good to reflect that Nicki didn't make it as a vampire. They didn't have this vampire life connection. It was always a struggle and, whatever. So From the part of the story where he talks about his childhood, he says, I wanted to be enclosed forever with people who believed I could be good if I wanted to be. And then later down the page, why did I always have to go to extremes? So he's kind of been the way that he is forever. Not even just because he's a vampire, but he is just the way that he is, you know? I think that him saying that he wants to be enclosed forever with people who believed that he could be good if he wanted to be is important to seeing how he gives people the dark gift pretty recklessly. He really tried to eventually have that with Nicki because it wasn't working, the him running away and never being around. That's also why he has such this fear of abandonment complex, which explains a lot of why he is, because of Magnus. He just wants people to be there to understand him. And I think that's very important to notice. And then here's a quote from Gabrielle, Lestat's mom. She says, in that moment, I am purely myself. I belong to no one. And she's talking about a dream that she had. I think this is really important because to notice how after she gets changed, she really runs off and does her own thing and doesn't listen to anybody. And Lestat won't see her for, decades. And she'll just be doing her own thing and living her own life. And I think that getting the dark gift is what gave her that ability, which is quite beautiful. Now we are to one of my favorite quotes of the entire franchise. Okay, nothing compares to this quote. And it's been said in the show very loosely, but I really need to see a scene of Nicki saying this quote, putting his whole heart and soul into it, saying it to Lestat, because this quote changed Lestat's brain chemistry. It's only the impossible can do the impossible. And that quote changed his life forever, I believe. And I just would love to see Nicki say that quote to him, before he gets his hands chopped off. So, and then this one is kind of sad. This one kind of starts in the beginning of the book, and then the second half of the quote's in the end of the book, because I connected the two. This is Lestat talking about talking with Nicki when they were in the beginning of their relationship, in Paris, talking forever and ever. And what he says is, I didn't want him to stop talking. I wanted it to go on and on. And then later in the book, after Nicki's gone, he is sent the violin that Nicki used to play and a letter. And Lestat looks at this violin and he says, our conversation went on and on. And hey, that's really depressing. That ruins my life. So, and then another Nicki quote that we have to include is, Lestat, I love you, Nicki said gravely. I love you as I have loved few people in my life, but in a real way. You're a fool with all your ideas about goodness. I think that Nicki was one of the people that saw Lestat for a truly, really good person and loved Lestat for who he was before he was changed. And Lestat never found that again. He never found somebody that really loved him semi-unconditionally, as intensely as Nicki did. And then when things started going downhill, the name Wolf Killer came to me very distinctly, as if someone had spoken it, but nobody had. Or maybe somebody did, and his name was Magnus, and he sucks, and he's hanging out outside your window. This is what Lestat said about that. Huge black eyes, seeming to stretch the white flesh in deep folds, the nose long and thin, in the mouth the jester's smile. There were the fang teeth, just touching the colorless lip, and the hair, a gleaming mass of black and silver, growing up high from the white forehead, flowing down over his shoulders and his arms. Magnus is truly a really terrifying character, and I really hope that the show does it justice, because Magnus is blood boiling. Next, a quote from Magnus. This is my body, this is my blood. Ask for it, Wolf Killer, and you will live forever. Quoting Jesus, which I think is just important to think about, is how he was given the choice. Was he though? Was he though? And then here we have one of the most important quotes in the story. This is Lestat accepting his fate. And this is a quote that I need to see Sam Reed say, maybe a voiceover, just something. But it's, I am dead. I am a vampire, and things will die so that I may live. I will drink their blood so that I may live. And I will never, never see Nicholas again, nor my mother, nor any of the humans I have known and loved, nor any of my human family. I will drink blood, and I'll live forever. That's a really good quote that they need to put. They need to put that quote in the show. I firmly believe that quote it's just so monumental. It's him saying, I have to leave this life behind because of what has just been given to me, what gift has just been given to me. After that, it's Magnus, threatening to jump into the flames and kill himself. And Lestat's fear of abandonment really sets in, and he's screaming, "But you can't leave me," just over and over and over again, and begging Magnus to not kill himself and not leave Lestat alone, because he doesn't know what he's doing on his own. He can't do this stuff on his own, but he does, and he figures it out. Okay, and then we have another really good quote that I love. Do devils love each other? Do they walk arm in arm in hell, saying, "Ah, you are my friend, how I love you"? I think that's important to notice, because Lestat hasn't had any vampire friends yet. He hasn't had any companions, and he's wondering, will I experience love again? It's kind of a silly quote that I can just imagine Lestat saying in his like thick French accent, just like totally judgmental. And then a really sad quote. The maddest thought came to me, that I would tell Nicki all about this, that as soon as I got home, I would lay it all out, the dream, the possible meaning, and we would talk. Nicki was Lestat's person to talk to. Nicki was Lestat's person. And him having to just leave his life behind is just, it's really upsetting. This quote is one of the most upsetting quotes of the book. This quote makes me really, really sad. Lestat says, "Emptiness here, in the quiet I had told myself that I wanted, just to be alone after the grisly struggle in Paris. Quiet in the realization, which I could not bring myself to confess to her, the realization gnawing at my insides like a starved animal, that I couldn't stand the sight of him now." This is after Lestat turns Nicki, and it's not going how we had hoped that it would go. You know, we hoped that they would get to be vampire lovers forever and everything would be happy. And Nicki completely changed. He couldn't handle the weight of being a vampire. And then later down the line, Nicki is yelling, Lestat would spit in the face of anyone who would be ashamed of us. And that's true. And then about Nicki again. He had recognized in my monster self something that he knew and loved. Because I think that Nicki loved Lestat unconditionally. And I think Lestat's way of handling the whole situation was very poor. But also, like, what would you have done in that situation? You know? Like, you have no idea what you would have done. There's no way to know what you would have done in this situation. Because it hasn't happened to you yet. So, yet. It hasn't happened to you yet. Watch out. Here's a really good burn that Lestat could say to Armand. And I think it would, oh my god, I think it would suck the air out of the room if we could get Sam Reed to say this out loud. Lestat goes, "You've been the slave of everything that has ever claimed you." And hey, if that ain't true, Armand haters rise up. And then I think I have one more to share. I think this whole section should be read aloud like a letter. It says, "It has come to the worst, as I feared. Our oldest friend, maddened by the excesses of our old violinist, finally imprisoned him in your old residence." Ouch. "And though his violin was given to him in his cell, his hands were taken away. He went into the flames." Nicki's gone now. It was really upsetting to me when Nicki died. My stuffed animal is named Nicki. It's named after Nicholas. I really miss Nicki. Should I say bye in the fangs? I think I'm going to say bye in the fangs. It is really upsetting, everything that happened. There's a lot more to this book, but I want to keep this video pretty short. I don't want to have expectations for how they're going to bring Akasha in, because Akasha is mainly alive in the Queen of the Damned book. So I'm like, my expectations are pretty low for that. But my expectations for the season itself, very high. But the Vampire Lestat, it's a beautiful story. And it's very tumultuous. And Nicki is my favorite character in the entire Vampire Chronicles series, if you couldn't already tell. I'm obsessed with Nicki. I would do anything for Nicki. I would go to war for Nicki. In season 3, I want them to really go crazy with the Nicki content. I want full-blown Nicki episodes. 2 at least. But if we're getting Nicki episodes, we also better be getting some Those Who Must Be Kept episodes. But those are all the quotes that I have that I think are really important to the book. Yeah, so thank you, Sam Reed. Thank you, Anne Rice. Thank you, the creators of the show. I'm going to show you guys my lock screen, just rotating pictures of Lestat from like every version, except for the Queen of the Damned movie, because that's a disgrace. That doesn't exist to me. But it's every like Lestat. It's been that way for over a year. I have not changed it, and I probably will never change it. Thank you for tuning into the campaign. Today was our stop in Vampire City, which is one of my biggest hyperfixations ever. It's taken over my life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week with a new video. Bye!